We are only a few months away from the Batman 2 officially beginning production, and over the last few weeks, a lot of rumors have begun circulating about potential castings and characters that could be playing a role in the Batman's highly anticipated sequel. However, even with all of these rumors and supposed leaks, which very likely could be wrong, there has still been very little officially revealed about the film and what direction the movie could possibly be going, and for that reason, as we still have very little clarity about the Batman 2 story, I want to talk about some comic storylines I would love to see Matt Reeves take inspiration from when creating the Batman 2. Now obviously, I don't expect Reeves to be doing any one-for-one adaptations of these stories. He would only be taking elements like he did in the first film, so I'm definitely not expecting any of these stories to be copied one-for-one, nor am I expecting any of these to be the only thing Reeves draws inspiration from. But these are some comic storylines that not only do I love, but I also think they could absolutely fit in this universe and do make sense for where the story has been left off in the Penguin and the Batman 1. And in the Batman 2, one location I would love to explore more in this universe is Arkham Asylum, which of course is not only one of Gotham's most iconic locations, but a location that I honestly think has been severely underutilized in past movies. I'm not saying that I need the majority of the Batman 2 to be set in Arkham Asylum, but I certainly would not be against it. One comic that I would love to see inspire a potential Arkham storyline in this movie is Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which for those of you not familiar with the comic storyline itself, this is the comic that heavily inspired Batman Arkham Asylum, as the main storyline involves inmates being broken out of their cells at Arkham, Batman being lured into the asylum, and then having to encounter a lot of his rogues gallery throughout the story itself. Now, I do not expect the Batman 2 to adapt this story specifically, however, there are seemingly a lot of things that I do think fit based on the rumors about returning cast and just the overall story for this universe so far. For example, it is currently understood that Barry Keoghan's Joker is going to play a role in this movie. How big of a role, I have no idea, but based on where we saw him last, he is very much still in Arkham Asylum, and unless he's broken out, his involvement in the story would most likely make sense at Arkham. Could someone break him out? Absolutely. I'm definitely not ruling that out. Additionally, I think it's very possible he could just play a very similar role to the one that he was intended to have in the first film, where he just is somebody that Batman goes to visit to learn more about maybe the new case that he's investigating within the Batman 2, which I do think would be a little disappointing, as I don't really know if that's what I want the Joker's reoccurring role to be. I did love the scene in the Batman one that was deleted, I should say. However, I just don't want to see that over and over again, especially considering I think that scene was cut out of the movie for a reason. Also, of course, there's the possibility that Barry Keoghan's involvement in the Batman 2 is literally just like one scene similar to his role in the Batman 1. But what if he did have a larger role in the movie and Batman needed to make a trip to Arkham because some of the inmates had been broken out? I think that'd be a really interesting place to take the next movie, and the Joker being the one running the show, or perhaps being manipulated by somebody like Hugo Strange or Jeremiah Arkham, could definitely make a lot of sense, and it would set those characters up to be the main villain instead of the Joker, who I know a lot of people don't want to see as the main villain. Hell, a lot of you don't even want to see him in the movie at all, which I totally understand, but for me personally, I love seeing Batman versus Joker, and we haven't seen that on the big screen in almost 20 years when the Batman 2 comes out, so I think there's still plenty of ways you could do it and not make Joker just this overwhelming force in the movie. I know it's hard to do, and just limiting Joker to a side role probably is a lot easier said than done, but I think this could be an interesting way to do it. Now, I'll admit, I do find it somewhat difficult to make this story work alongside a large focus on the Dents, as I'm sure isolating Bruce in Arkham Asylum for the majority of the film would make the Dents and Bruce feel far too separated in a movie where I'm sure they will have a very large role to play, considering the actors that are apparently cast as the Dents, those being Sebastian Stan, Scarlett Johansson, which you're not getting actors like that to just show up for 5-minute cameos. However, another more likely scenario, which could still lead to Bruce spending some time in Arkham, but it could definitely be in a much more limited capacity, is the fact that we know that Bruce in this universe is in Arkham, and perhaps him further exploring his family's history after the events of the first film could lead him on a trip to Arkham Asylum to understand more about what his family's legacy has left behind, especially as a new drug, Bliss, is running rampant on the streets, which has some ties to Arkham Asylum as we saw in the Penguin. And if he does find himself in Arkham Asylum, whether that's for 5 minutes or 20 minutes within the story, I really hope they take a lot of inspiration from David McKean's art, as that book just makes Arkham so damn creepy and unsettling. I mean, truly, the vibe and setting the book creates is exactly what I think is perfect for Arkham in this universe. We of course saw a little bit of how fucked up Arkham was in the Penguin series, as we saw what Sophia had to go through, but so much of the horror was based on what she had to specifically experience. I want to see more of the rotting of the building itself. I want the creepy atmosphere that you get in something like the Arkham Asylum video game, and I want them to truly emphasize how much of a horror house Arkham Asylum is, and that's exactly what this book did. Now, could it be maybe a little too extreme for a Batman movie movie that I'm sure wants to make $1 billion? Maybe, but I would love to see them just go for it and truly embrace the darkness of Arkham Asylum if we get more of it in this movie, which is a big if, but I'm kind of optimistic. Another story that I think would be really interesting to draw inspiration from is Batman the Impostor, which is written by Mattson Tomlin, who is the co-writer of the Batman 2, and the story of the comic itself, even though it is not canon to Matt Reeves' Batman universe, certainly is written and drawn in a way that absolutely fits in the Matt Reeves Batman universe, so I'm not sure whether or not that immediately disqualifies it from being used in the movie or makes it more likely, but I think the idea of Batman having to deal with an imposter that kills could be interesting to tackle, especially considering at the end of the first movie Bruce realizes Batman must become more for the city of Gotham, and based on the monologue from him near the end of the movie, he intends to become more of a symbol of hope instead of a symbol for vengeance, and that would be immensely hard to do as somebody is dressing up as you and gunning people down. Now, I know for some of you this could sound like it veers a little bit too much into what the Batman 1 already tackled, as this would be similarly another murder mystery, and the Riddler even in the Batman 1 used Batman as inspiration, but I do think there would be enough differences as this would be an attempt to just really drag Batman's name in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the police, and turn the city against him to get him removed out of the picture. Also, so many of Batman's great stories are murder mysteries, and I honestly think that they could find a way to make it fresh and feel completely different than what we got in the Batman 1. Also, with the killer clearly attempting to put the blame on Batman in this story, I think it could be a great way to set Harvey and Batman on a collision course, as Harvey could be leading the task force to take Batman down. I'd find this especially interesting if the movie made Bruce and Harvey really good friends, as the dichotomy could be really fun to play off of. Harvey may think he hates Batman, but Batman is truly one of the only few friends he has left and one of the only people he can actually trust in Gotham. There are some other parts of the story that I did enjoy as well, including the counseling sessions that he has with Leslie Tompkins, which gives Bruce a space to spend more time delving into why he is Batman and why he does what he does, and I think getting more of that time to delve into Bruce's psyche could also be really interesting. Now, if they were to do the imposter storyline, I definitely think altering who the actual imposter is could potentially benefit the story and the movie specifically. I do think the actual story in the book made sense, but for the sake of a movie, I think it'd be far more interesting and fun to maybe make the imposter somebody with a little more oomph that would garner a bit more of a fan excitement. For example, I think somebody like Deathstroke or Deadshot, perhaps working under the orders of somebody like Penguin, could make a lot of sense, as Penguin could be trying to get Batman out of the picture as he attempts to gain more power in Gotham, and one way to get Batman out of the picture is to turn the entire city against him. And one thing I would really like to see in the Batman 2 is just to see Robert Pattinson's Batman challenged more physically in hand-to-hand combat. He is very young in his career, and we can see he takes plenty of a beating in the first film, but I would like to see him go toe-to-toe with somebody that can actually rival him in hand-to-hand combat, and I think whether that's a Deathstroke, a KG Beast, or whatever DC assassin you want to use, even somebody like Lady Shiva, I just think would be really cool and add an element that I think was missing from the first film. The first film had some really awesome action moments where we see Batman taking on large groups of people, whether that's in the arena or at the train stop at the beginning of the film. I really do think Matt Reeves did a great job with the action he had, but there was nobody that Batman met within the film itself that could actually challenge him. The only time he actually was challenged was because he was fighting large groups of people. I just want to see him go mano a mano with somebody from DC's amazing rogues gallery of assassins. And I know I've said a lot of times in the past that I think the idea of pairing Penguin with an assassin is a great idea for this movie, as we know the Penguin is trying to seize more power in Gotham, especially politically, based on where his eyes are set at the end of the Penguin, but Batman's going to be in his way, and Oz clearly cannot challenge him in hand-to-hand combat. He would need somebody else to do that. Him hiring an assassin that could help weaken Batman by turning the entire city against him, while also Bruce is trying to become a bigger symbol of hope in the city, most likely as Bruce Wayne himself, but also as Batman. I just think makes for a lot of fun storylines in the movie, and is a great way to also include characters like the Dents, who could also play a large role in trying to take out Batman, or be a rival to somebody like Penguin, and then you could do the whole Two-Face stuff, or if you wanted to have Harvey or Gilda running for mayor, stuff like that, just to put them in opposition of Penguin, I think could definitely work. The imposter, of course, could be somebody working completely on their own, or working for somebody else in Gotham as well. I do not want to make it seem like it has to be connected to Oz, but I just think it would make a lot of sense. One comic book storyline that we know Matt Reeves has taken some inspiration from already when creating his take on Batman is Batman Earth 1, and I'm hoping we get to see more of that in the Batman 2, as I do personally love Batman Earth 1, and I think adapting some elements of that story would be a fresh way to use some characters that we've already seen on the big screen, for example Harvey Dent, who in the Earth 1 universe does not actually end up becoming Two-Face. Instead, he ends up dying in a prison riot where he is attacked and burned in the face. And in this universe, it's his sister Jessica Dent who basically ends up becoming the Two-Face of that universe. But I use the term Two-Face lightly because the design itself is really nothing like Two-Face, but her face is marked up and she has a split personality based on her brother. And I honestly find the concept to be really interesting, and I think it would be a fun change of pace for the movie because it would be quite different than the expectation of Harvey becoming Two-Face, which is personally something that I'm not against seeing in this universe, but I definitely wouldn't mind something new. Also, it's not like Reeves would have to adapt this story one for one. Hell, maybe Harvey lives and Jessica just ends up being the one with the darker side from the beginning, and they can just simply use the concept of Jessica becoming Two-Face. I think that could be the best of both worlds, as you could keep Harvey and have Two-Face, but I do find that quite unlikely, but one can dream, because even though I would love to see the story adapted, man, I do not want to see Sebastian Stan die an hour into this movie. His casting as Harvey feels too perfect to stop after only an hour, but it would be quite a shock for audiences not familiar with the story if Scarlett Johansson does end up playing Jessica. Also, if they do a true adaptation of Earth 1, Harvey is an absolute ass, especially to Bruce, which based on Sebastian Stan's past work, I think he could absolutely nail, so it at least makes his death a little bit easier. Also, if they were to go with Jessica as Two-Face, just imagine the great things Scarlett Johansson could do in a villain role in a movie like this. I think it could be absolutely awesome to see. I get it, for some of you, this may not be what you want to see, as in your mind, Harvey Dent is Two-Face and no one else can compare, but considering most likely Scarlett Johansson is playing a Dent and is most certainly going to have a large role in this film, I am really hoping it is not Gilda, as I just do not want to see another adaptation of The Long Halloween where she ends up being the holiday killer. We already got a lot of the main story points of The Long Halloween in the first Batman film, especially with the takedown of Falcone and the city truly being handed over to the crazies and the supervillains, as well as there being a big murder mystery. Doing a Long Halloween adaptation again would just feel a little bit like overkill, and I want to be clear, this is not me trying to diss the Long Halloween story at all, because in my opinion, it is the best Batman book. I mean, it truly is a perfect read that absolutely hums, and I recommend it to anyone whether or not you've read comics in the past, because I think it's that good of a story. But I just hope we do something new, and Scarlett Johansson being Jessica instead of Gilda and potentially being this universe's version of Two-Face would be something completely different from what we've seen in the past. But I will say, if she is Gilda, I beg you to tie it to something else like the court or simply do anything else, because if she is announced as Gilda Dent, I'm just going to go into the movie with the expectation that she is going to be a killer in this movie, especially if there is any sort of murder mystery. But maybe that's exactly where Reeves wants us to be, and he could fake us out with something that they do completely crazy in the movie, and in that case, touche, Matt Reeves. Also, it'd be really funny if in a couple of weeks we find out that Scarlett Johansson is actually not going to be playing anybody in the Dent family. Maybe she's Andrea Beaumont or something, so this whole conversation would become a moot point. But again, this is where it seems to be trending, and I just really hope they do something a little bit unexpected. Also, one small storyline from Batman Earth 1 that is also just great material is Harvey Bullock's story, where he comes to Gotham as basically a TV personality and attempts to be a cop in Gotham as a partner to Jim Gordon, and seeing what Gotham can do to an idealistic cop in a short period of time is both terrifying and really puts an emphasis on just how brutal the city is. I think it could make for a really great side story alongside Jim Gordon, as it shows what makes him so special. One comic that very likely could serve as inspiration for this movie is Dark Victory, which is a story that takes place after The Long Halloween, and like I said earlier, was very clearly an inspiration for the first Batman film, so Reeves using the story that follows The Long Halloween as inspiration for his sequel does make a lot of sense. Now, because the Batman is not a one-for-one adaptation of The Long Halloween, there are elements that clearly would not fit. For example, Harvey's large involvement as Two-Face, and the fact that a large part of the story is the mystery of the Hangman Killer, which the Batman universe already tackled in The Penguin with Sophia and Carmine. So you may be wondering, why is this story included in this video if I'm saying just all of the reasons why it won't fit? And to that I say, I'm basically going to cherry pick one storyline from this, and that is the inclusion of Dick Grayson as Robin, which is really well done in Dark Victory, and yes, I am Team Robin for the Batman too. I think seeing this specific version of Bruce bringing in Dick Grayson and training him would be an absolutely fascinating dynamic, and it's been far too long since we got to see Dick Grayson on the big screen, and I'm basically going to be asking for him to show up in all Batman movies until it finally happens again. He is way too important of a character for DC to be sidelined this long, and Dark Victory is a great origin for the character that I think could be great inspiration for if they were to include him in this universe, and I really hope they do. It would bring a fresh, different element to this version of Batman that we have not seen in over 20 years on the big screen, and I honestly trust Matt Reeves to find a way to ground it and make it somewhat realistic so it doesn't seem so out of place. And I understand to people the concept of Robin is just weird, and it's always going to feel out of place, especially if you were to bring it into a very dark and grounded universe like like the Batman universe currently is. But again, I kind of trust Matt Reeves, and I think Robin is a character that is so vitally important to the development of Batman that it truly is ridiculous we've had to wait so long to see Batman and Robin together on the big screen, because to me, Batman is not complete without Robin and the rest of the Bat family. But of course, I'm not asking for the rest of the Bat family in the Batman universe. We'll save that for the DCU. But I think Dick Grayson is a completely reasonable ask, and I really hope Matt Reeves just says, fuck it, I'm gonna be the one to do this right. And I think there are ways they could do it, for example, like aging up Dick Grayson, which I think fixes a lot of the problems people have with the concept of Robin. But I just really hope we get to see him in this movie, because I do think the dynamic for especially this version of Batman that we have gotten from Robert Pattinson, taking in somebody who shares a similar tragedy to what he experienced, trying to emotionally connect with said character, and then eventually training him and making him his partner, would be really interesting and fascinating to see. This last one is a story that I know to many is overrated and a really fun comic story to hate on these days, but damn it, I still love it, and that is the Court of Owls, who I truly do believe are the logical endgame for this universe, with its immense focus on corruption, and I would love to see what Reeves could do with them. Now, I totally agree that the ideal thing to do most likely would be to introduce the Court in, say, the second film, and then actually have them as the focus in, say, a final third film. But just being real with you all, I feel like the idea of getting a third The Batman film is far from a guarantee, and I definitely think it's a very real possibility that The Batman 2 is the last film we're going to get from this universe. And if that's the case, I think including the Court would be a great and logical conclusion of the story that we have set up in this universe. With all the rumors we have about The Batman 2, one thing I feel is definitely still up in the air is who is going to be the main villain. It certainly won't be somebody like Christopher Dent. It most likely won't be Gilda, Harvey, or potentially Jessica, as that would take some time to set up. I think Hush could make sense. Maybe it's just Penguin, but until that question is answered, I definitely think the Court are in the running, and I would not be surprised at all if they ended up being the main villains of this movie. If Reeves were to use the Court, it obviously would not be a one-for-one adaptation, as there are some fantastical elements that I do not think would fit in this universe, but I would love to see the Labyrinth, a more grounded version of Talons, and I just think the secret society of wealthy elite running Gotham especially fits in this universe, and it is very likely that past Arkham's or even Wayne's maybe could have served, and that could be a really interesting thing for Bruce to have to battle with in this movie. Regardless of what Reeves decides to do in the sequel, until proven otherwise, I just have full faith he is absolutely going to deliver an amazing film, whether or not he uses inspiration from any of the comics I talked about in this video. But now I want to know, what comic storylines would you like to see serve as inspiration for The Batman 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.